Have you ever made a single decision, one tiny misstep, thinking it's no big deal, only to watch it spiral into a catastrophe that tears your entire world apart? I'm talking about the kind of mistake that doesn't just haunt you. It shatters the people you love most, leaving you drowning in guilt and wondering if there's any way to piece the fragments back together. My name is Rachel, and I'm about to bare my soul in a story that's been eating me alive for years, a story of a choice I made that destroyed my family and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. If you've ever carried the weight of a regret so heavy it feels like it's crushing you, or if you've ever wondered how far the ripples of one bad call can spread, stay with me. This isn't just about a mistake. It's about love, loss, and the desperate hope that maybe redemption isn't completely out of reach. I'm sitting here in my dimly lit kitchen in a small town just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, with the faint hum of crickets outside my window and a cold cup of coffee in my hands, staring at an old family photo that's been tucked away in a drawer for too long. It's past midnight, and I can't sleep. Haven't been able to for weeks, because the memories keep clawing their way back, reminding me of the life I had before everything fell apart. If you've ever felt like your past is a ghost that won't let you go, or if you've ever had to face the wreckage of your own making, then you'll get why I need to tell this story, even if it hurts to relive it. Let's go back to a time when I thought I had it all figured out, to a quiet mountain town where family was everything, until one wrong move changed it all forever. I grew up in the rolling hills of western North Carolina, in a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone, and the Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like silent guardians over our little world. My childhood was the kind you'd see in old movies, running barefoot through fields of wildflowers, fishing with my dad in the creeks that wound through the valleys, and sitting on the porch swing with my mom, listening to her hum old folk songs as the sun dipped below the peaks. I was the youngest of three, with two older brothers, Caleb and Ethan, who were my protectors and my tormentors in equal measure. Caleb, the eldest, was the serious one, always looking out for us with a quiet intensity, while Ethan, just 2 years older than me, was the wild card, full of reckless energy and a laugh that could light up any room. We weren't rich. Dad worked as a mechanic, and Mom picked up shifts at the local diner. But we had each other, and in a town like ours, that was enough. Our house, a weathered two-story with peeling paint and a sagging front porch, was always filled with noise, whether it was arguments over who ate the last slice of pie or late-night card games that ended in fits of laughter. Family was the cornerstone of my life back then. Every Sunday, we'd pile into Dad's old pickup and drive to Grandma's house for dinner, where the smell of fried chicken and cornbread would greet us before we even stepped through the door. I'd sit at the long oak table, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins, feeling like I belonged to something bigger than myself, something unbreakable. My brothers and I had our share of squabbles. Ethan once hid my favorite doll in the barn for a week just to mess with me, and Caleb would roll his eyes every time I begged to tag along on their adventures. But beneath it all was a bond one thought nothing could touch. I looked up to them, especially Caleb, who seemed to carry the weight of being the oldest with a kind of stoic grace. He'd help me with my homework when I struggled with math, his brow furrowed in concentration, and tell me stories about the world beyond our mountains, promising one day we'd see it together. Ethan, on the other hand, taught me how to climb trees and skip stones, always daring me to push my limits, even if it meant scraped knees and Mom's scolding. Those memories, of us against the world, are the ones I cling to now, even as they sting with what came later. By the time I was in my early 20s, life had started to shift in ways I hadn't expected. I was 23, working as a cashier at the local grocery store while taking night classes at the community college in Asheville, dreaming of becoming a teacher one day. Caleb, at 29, had moved to Charlotte for a job in construction management, building a life with his fiancée, Sarah, while Ethan, 25, stayed closer to home, bouncing between odd jobs and getting into trouble more often than not. Mom and Dad were still in the same old house, though the years of hard work had started to show in the lines on their faces and the slower way they moved. I'd visit them most weekends, helping with chores or just sitting on the porch, watching the mist settle over the mountains as we talked about nothing and everything. Life wasn't perfect, money was tight, Ethan's antics worried us all, and I felt stuck in a rut sometimes, but it was familiar, safe. I thought I knew where I was headed, thought I understood the people around me, until the day I made a choice that would unravel it all. It started with something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that I didn't even think twice about it at the time. Ethan had been in a rough patch for months, hanging out with a crowd I didn't trust, coming home late with bloodshot eyes and excuses that didn't add up. I'd heard whispers around town about him getting mixed up in something shady, petty theft, maybe worse, but I didn't want to believe it. He was my brother, the one who'd taught me how to whistle through a blade of grass, the one who'd carried me on his shoulders during county fairs. I told myself he was just lost, that he'd find his way back. One evening, after a long shift at the store, I got a call from him, his voice shaky and urgent. He said he needed help, just a small favor, nothing big. He was at a rundown bar on the edge of town, a place I'd been warned to steer clear of, and he needed me to bring him some cash, $200. He swore he'd pay me back. I hesitated, my gut telling me something was off, but the desperation in his tone tugged at me. I couldn't say no to him, not when I could hear the fear beneath his bravado. So, I scraped together the money from my savings, drove out to that grimy bar with its flickering neon sign, and handed it over, ignoring the uneasy stares from the men loitering outside. He hugged me, promised it was a one-time thing, and I drove home, telling myself I'd done the right thing, that I'd helped my brother when he needed me most. That moment, that one decision to hand over the cash without asking too many questions, was the pebble that started the avalanche. I didn't know it then, but Ethan wasn't just in a bind. He was in deep with the wrong people, using that money to pay off a debt that was only a fraction of what he owed. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing changes, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Ethan disappeared for days at a time, not answering calls or texts, leaving Mom in a constant state of worry. When he did show up, he was jumpy, paranoid, snapping at the smallest things. I'd catch him pacing in the backyard at odd hours, muttering to himself, and once, I saw bruises on his arms that he tried to hide under long sleeves. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but every time I tried, he'd brush me off with a forced grin, saying I worried too much. Meanwhile, the whispers in town grew louder. People saying they'd seen him with known troublemakers, that he was mixed up in something dangerous. I felt this gnawing dread, a sense that I'd played a part in whatever was happening, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. The real blow came about a month after that night at the bar, on a chilly October evening when the leaves were turning gold and crimson across the mountains. I was at home, curled up on the couch with a textbook, when my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. Her voice was trembling, barely coherent, as she told me Ethan had been arrested. My heart dropped into my stomach as she explained what little she knew. He'd been caught in a drug bust, part of a small-time operation moving stuff through the county. He wasn't just using, he was dealing, or at least helping, caught up with a group that had been under watch for months. I sat there, the phone slipping in my sweaty palm, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. Ethan, my reckless but lovable brother, involved in something so dark? It didn't seem real. But as Mom's sobs echoed through the line, the reality crashed over me, along with a sickening realization that $200 I'd given him, that small favor, had likely gone straight into fueling this mess. I hadn't just helped him out of a jam. I'd enabled him, given him the means to dig himself deeper. The guilt hit me like a freight train, heavy and unrelenting. I kept replaying that night in my head, the way I'd ignored my instincts, the way I'd handed over the money without pushing for the truth. If I'd said no, if I'd demanded to know what was really going on, would things have turned out differently? Would he have come clean, or at least stepped back from the edge? I felt like I'd betrayed not just Ethan, but the whole family, by being so naive, so quick to trust. I drove to Mom and Dad's house that night, the winding mountain roads blurring through my tears, and found them sitting in the living room, shell-shocked. Dad's face was a mask of quiet rage, his hands clenched into fists, while Mom kept wringing a dish towel, her eyes red and swollen. They didn't blame me, not out loud, but I could feel the weight of their disappointment, or maybe that was just my own self-loathing projecting onto them. We didn't talk much, just sat in that heavy silence, the ticking of the old grandfather clock the only sound, as I wrestled with the knowledge that my actions, or inaction, had contributed to this nightmare. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and chaos. Ethan was held in county jail, awaiting a hearing, and the legal fees started piling up, draining what little savings Mom and Dad had. I visited him once, sitting across from him in a cold, sterile room, the glass between us feeling like a metaphor for the distance that had grown. He looked smaller somehow, defeated, his usual spark gone. I wanted to yell at him, to ask how he could do this to us, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stared, my chest aching with a mix of anger and sorrow, as he mumbled apologies I wasn't sure I could accept. Back home, the town gossip mill churned relentlessly. Neighbors who'd once smiled at us now whispered behind their hands, and I felt the sting of their judgment every time I walked into the grocery store. Mom stopped going to church, too ashamed to face the pitying looks, while Dad threw himself into work, staying at the garage late into the night to avoid the emptiness at home. And me? I carried the guilt like a second skin, unable to shake the thought that I'd played a role in breaking my family apart. The unexpected twist came when Caleb returned from Charlotte, called back by the crisis, his face etched with a fury I'd never seen before. I'd hoped his presence would be a comfort, a reminder of the strength we'd always drawn from each other, but instead, it deepened the fracture. He'd always been the responsible one, the brother who held things together, and seeing Ethan's fall hit him harder than I'd expected. But what I didn't see coming was his blame, not just toward Ethan, but toward me. Late one night, as we sat on the porch of Mom and Dad's house, the air thick with the scent of pine and impending rain, he turned to me, his voice low and cutting. He'd heard about the money I'd given Ethan, pieced it together from bits of conversation, and he didn't hold back. He said I should have known better, that I'd been reckless, that my blind loyalty had made things worse. His words sliced through me, sharper than any knife, because deep down, I already believed them. I'd always looked up to Caleb, craved his approval, and now, to see the disappointment in his eyes, to feel his judgment, was more than I could bear. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I just sat there, tears streaming down my face, as the rift between us grew into a chasm I didn't know how to cross. That confrontation with Caleb was a turning point, though not in the way I'd hoped. It forced me to look at myself, at the choices I'd made, and question who I really was. I'd always seen myself as the peacemaker, the one who kept the family close, but now I wondered if I'd been more of a liability, too trusting, too quick to ignore red flags for the sake of harmony. I started pulling away, not just from Caleb, but from everyone. I stopped going to family dinners, made excuses to avoid mom's calls, buried myself in work and school as a distraction. But the memories kept creeping in. Images of us as kids, racing through the woods, Caleb lifting me onto his shoulders to pick apples from the highest branches, Ethan's laughter echoing as we splashed in the creek. Those moments felt like they belonged to another life, one I'd lost through my own stupidity. I'd walk the trails near my apartment, the same ones we'd explored as children, and feel this hollow ache, a longing for a time when things were simpler, when I didn't carry the weight of knowing I'd helped tear us apart. Ethan's hearing came and went, a grim affair that ended with a 2-year sentence in a state facility for possession with intent to distribute. The day the gavel fell, I wasn't there. I couldn't face it, couldn't sit in that courtroom and see the finality of his fall. Mom told me later that he'd looked at her with such regret, such shame, that it broke her heart all over again. I felt like a coward for not showing up, but the thought of seeing him in handcuffs, of facing the reality of what he'd become, and my part in it, was too much. Instead, I stayed home, staring out at the misty mountains from my window, wondering how we'd gotten here. The family dynamic shifted irreversibly after that. Caleb went back to Charlotte, colder and more distant than ever, barely speaking to me beyond curt texts. Mom and Dad aged overnight, their once lively home now a quiet shell, haunted by Ethan's absence. And I was left grappling with a loneliness I hadn't anticipated, a sense of being unmoored from the people who'd always been my anchor. Reflecting on my own life, I started to see how much of my identity had been tied to my family, to being the little sister, the one who bridged the gaps between my brothers, the one who kept the laughter alive. Without that role, I didn't know who I was. My dreams of teaching felt hollow now, overshadowed by the mess I'd helped create. I'd sit in my tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and half-written essays, and feel like a fraud, like I didn't deserve to chase a better future when I'd contributed to ruining Ethan's. I started questioning every decision I'd ever made, wondering if I'd always been this blind, this prone to missteps. I drive past the old barn where we used to play hide and seek, or see the diner where Mom worked, and feel this pang of nostalgia mixed with grief, a reminder of what we'd lost. I missed my brothers, both of them, in different ways, Caleb's steady presence, Ethan's chaotic warmth, but I didn't know how to reach out, didn't know if they'd even want me to. The emotional conflict within me grew more tangled as time passed. Part of me was furious with Ethan for dragging us into his mess, for lying, for risking everything for a quick fix. But another part ached for him, remembering the brother who'd always made me feel safe, who'd been lost long before that night at the bar. I was angry with Caleb, too, for his harsh words, for shutting me out when I needed him most, but I couldn't deny the truth in what he'd said. I had been reckless, and I had to own that. And then there was the guilt, the endless, suffocating guilt, that whispered to me in the quiet moments, telling me I'd failed them all. I wanted to fix it, to turn back time and undo that one wrong move, but I knew I couldn't. The question that haunted me most was whether I could forgive myself, or if I even deserved to. I'd lie awake at night, the distant howl of a train cutting through the stillness, and wonder if there was a way to rebuild, or if some breaks were too deep to mend. Now, over a year after Ethan's arrest, I'm still at a crossroads, caught between the past I can't escape and a future I can't quite envision. I've started writing letters to Ethan, though I haven't sent them yet, pouring out my anger, my sorrow, my love, trying to make sense of it all on paper. I don't know if he'd read them, or if they'd change anything, but it's the only way I can think to reach him right now. Caleb and I exchange occasional messages, mostly about Mom and Dad, but there's a wall between us, one I'm not sure how to tear down. I've thought about driving to Charlotte, showing up at his door, forcing a conversation, but the fear of rejection stops me every time. Mom and Dad are trying to move forward, planning to visit Ethan soon, and they've asked me to come, but I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be. The guilt still lingers, a constant companion, though some days it's quieter, dulled by time or exhaustion. I've started hiking again, tracing the old paths in the mountains, finding a strange solace in the rhythm of my steps, in the way the peaks stand unchanging despite everything that's fallen apart below them. I've also been reflecting on what family means to me now, on whether it's something I can reclaim or if it's lost forever. I see other families in town, laughing together at the farmer's market or piling into cars for weekend trips, and feel this bittersweet pang, a mix of longing and resignation. I want to believe we can heal, That Ethan will come out of this stronger, that Caleb and I can find our way back to each other, that mom and dad can smile again without that shadow in their eyes. But I don't know if that's realistic.